My next question to Zafar Masood sir. Given your recent push for green and inclusive finance, how can Pakistan's financial sector drive resilience not just through buffers, but by financing greener, more competitive industries that can withstand external volatility and trade shocks?
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think your question is too elaborate. To respond to this, I would need perhaps a lot of time, but I'll try and respond it very quickly. So first, to figure out the vulnerabilities, the external vulnerabilities, how would they potentially impact the Pakistani economy and Pakistani, particularly the exporting sector. So the first and the foremost thing is obviously the exports. They remain, and this has been our dilemma for the longest time. I let my friend Mr. Durkan speak about the tariffs, the damage that the tariffs have done in terms of making us non-competitive on the export side. But that's the reality, and that keeps our exports much more vulnerable now than otherwise, because we're non-competitive to begin with. Second one is obviously the FDI, and the third one is the debt piece. We are largely dependent, especially when you're operating in a country which has massive external deficit. There is always a dependence on the foreign flows on the debt side too. Now, interestingly enough, all these three constituencies, Dr. Saab, the biggest opportunity is on the green financing side. There is funding available out there. There is no lack of funding as far as the green financing and climate compliance is concerned. There is lack of project availability and capacity, unfortunately. And the debt and equity, both pieces could be well taken care of at most competitive pricing for the most longer tenor possible in case of through green financing. The importance of climate compliance is very much appreciated by the large importers outside, especially the sector that Dr. Shamshad Akhtar also talked about, bed linen and garments. And the more sophisticated ones are quite keen on making sure that they'll get the imports from those exporters who are compliant on compliance and DEI standards. So therefore, if you are already complying with the green guidelines, you tend to get less vulnerable to the external shocks on the export side too. And irrespective of how volatile the economic or political situation may be, whether it's driven by the tariffs or otherwise, the green financing will remain a big opportunity to make sure that you keep yourself afloat. Let's figure out where Pakistan stands in terms of their ability to capitalize on these green funding opportunity, the climate compliance opportunity. On the export side, bed linen and garments, there are large exporters who are largely done well in terms of making compliance with the global green guidelines. And there is more out there, and I think with the emerging situation, these people will have an advantage over the others. But on the financing piece, and Dr. Saab, it seems like a rhetoric question directed towards me, the second part of your question, the financing one, I must say that we are not doing enough. The banks are not doing enough. Unfortunately, the government is not doing enough. We all have to work together to make sure that we'll capitalize on this opportunity which is out there. The primary reason why we have not been able to do well is because of the lack of bankable projects available. Green taxonomy is still not up and running. Blended finance is not embedded enough in the system that you would see some kind of benefits coming through. And the lack of coordination, ladies and gentlemen, between the provinces, the local governments, and the federal government is a big problem as well. By the way, this is not something which is peculiar to Pakistan. It is happening in 155 countries right now as per the recent UNDP report. Having said that, we have an opportunity here. There is the 27th amendment which is being done, and Minister Saab, 28th amendment we're hearing would also be coming through at some point in time. My submission would be that we all must work towards making a proposition that this piece of coordination could be improved through that 28th amendment between the provinces and the federal government. Something massive could come out of on the economic front if we'll be able to skin this cat. The other one is the capacity building piece, Dr. Saab. And the capacity building piece, I would suggest that not just in this arena locally, but at the SAARC level, because, you know, climate has no borders. Therefore, we are all in the same situation as far as the climate vulnerabilities are concerned. And maybe at a SAARC level, whether India wants to come through or not, we don't care. We don't need India, frankly. We can do it without India. Let's talk to Bangladesh. Let's talk to Nepal. They are also as badly hurt as we are. Let's work with them and take it forward as an agenda of the region. Lastly, Dr. Saab, you know, just to connect this whole topic with the conference's main theme today, look, the future global order is in collaboration and cooperation. And the confrontation will only lead to global disorder in the future. Climate financing could be that binding force to bring all that order together, collaboration together. The agenda of climate is so gigantic, Dr. Saab, that it cannot be tackled by one or two or three parties. The collaboration is the name of the game, and it was fitting in really well with the topic today as well. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you very much. You summed up really well. My question for Zafar Saab, since tariff disruptions often hit SMEs and farm-led, women-led businesses the hardest, how can our financial system evolve to protect and empower these vulnerable yet vital players in the export economy?
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Before I respond to your question directly, a couple of things I would like to pick up from Minister Saab's last remarks. One is the fact that when Minister Saab talked about elite, that's the business elite. There's intellectual elite also. The reforms come through the intellectual elites. Our problem is that our intellectual elites are also equally to be blamed for not doing their job. It's not just the business elites alone. Business elite, whether it's are actually driven by the rent-seeking piece, is the one which is a concern. And in Pakistan, we are faced with that dilemma, where, you know, it's either by structure, like in the case of IPPs, or by as a consequence. In the case of banking, for example, we are in a state where the flourishing business are rent seekers, and business elites are not motivated to do things which are required to be done. And the intellectual elites are also not stepping up. The reforms come through when a lead bargain happens, as my friend Stephen Durkin argues in his book. And that bargain is missing. That bargain needs to be sorted out and encouraged. Dr. Saab, now coming to your question. You know, while the consequences of the tariff are still to be figured out, there is still, we are not very clear how it will pan out eventually. But it seems like that there will be some kind of demand destruction, you know, consumer demand destruction. And as the things are emerging, our comparative economies like Bangladesh and Vietnam, they are in the same bracket of tariffs as we are. So therefore, possibly having an advantage of us having a lower tariff in comparison to the others seems to be a far-fetched reality. So in all possibility, it seems like that there will be no negative consequences. And if we do not put our act together, and we'll talk about how that could be done. And especially, on the exports and FDI side. FDI, we don't get much FDI in any case, so there's nothing to lose there as such. So blessing in disguise, in a way. On the other hand, on the export side, the high-end export goes to US, and that's where some kind of destruction is possible. Low-end products are likely to be less hurt in comparison to the others. SMEs are actually operating within that space of low quality exports. SMEs are, Dr. Anil, are fitting into this equation in two ways. One, as a direct exporter, is around 10%, and around 25% as part of the supply chain. So if I think that 10% will remain largely unhurt, but this 25% may get an impact. But then, the reality is that 40% of the GDP is SME, and it's predominantly, therefore, is domestic. So the vulnerability is not that substantial, at least in my very basic assessment, based on what seems like on the horizon. Having said that, we must be very clear that SME is a priority sector, and we give this the due importance that is necessary. I am taking the advantage of the presence of, Minister Saab here, who directly looks after the SME sector from the government side. I must compliment that last year the government has done quite well, and the banks have done well after a long break, where we've been accused of funding government a lot in terms of increasing our financing to SMEs. The SME financing increased by 41%, both in terms of amount and in terms of number of SMEs. The number of SMEs increased by 90,000 to now 276,000, and the amount increased by 201 billion rupees to now 693 billion rupees, which is a phenomenal growth. And this has all happened at the back of the government of Pakistan's program. And I must say, ladies and gentlemen, government of Punjab really deserves a round of applause here for doing a phenomenal job on SME financing. Look, Dr. Saab, I'm very clear on this. When you talk about priority sector globally, these are two global gurus of business and economy sitting here. They'll bear me on this. Nowhere in the world priority sector flourishes or operates without the government support.
Yep.
We should not shy away by demanding it. It's our right. We should ask the government that you should give the first loss guarantee, you should give the subsidy to this sector. Even today, by the way, if you go to the Department of Defense Energy, Ministry of Defense Energy Department website of US, you'll see concessional financing there for which probably would have disappeared by now, thanks to Mr. Trump, but it was definitely there. And in fact, Tesla was the product of that financing. They got that concessional financing. Why can't we demand this? This is our right. The government has to step up and make sure that for the SMEs, they remain, protected and supported without even being exposed to these tariff upheaval that we are witnessing globally.
Thank you very much.